Peterson. This is a 49 Chevy I'm giving up for Jim's rebuild on his 51 Custom. We were going to do a gasser with it, and decided it's a little better deal if we give it to Jim for his process. It's been in storage for about 10 years, and it was in a barn for about 20 years before that, and we found it, and we've had it, like I say, over 10 years, so it's time to let it go.
My name is Bill Napoleon. I'm the owner of Motion Unlimited Museum, and you are in the inner sanctum of Motion Unlimited. This is our restoration shop. This is a very private area. I don't allow anyone to come back in here. So you are getting a super treat that will probably never happen again after this car is done. The Jewel, as you see it, which was formerly owned by Jim Newsel, is under restoration in our shop, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But we do restoration shop here. We do restoration work here at our shop, but we only do our own vehicles that we're going to sell, or vehicles for the museum or whatever. The shop is fully equipped, everything we need, and so I started on this. I work by myself. I just can't seem to find anybody that knows how to work on this old stuff. So I work by myself, and I started on this about 3 weeks ago. And the interesting thing about a car like this, it makes it very difficult, is the car had been completely dismantled with very little of it left. And so I spent the last week putting it back together to where I normally would have started from. So actually this 3 weeks worth of work is kind of a moot point, because I'm going to have to take it all apart anyway. But the car had been unbelievably butchered. Jim's brother Dick was an unbelievable artist when it came to automobiles, his paintwork. He did most of this custom work on the front of the Jewel, as you're looking at the dual quad headlights, the tube grill. He did most of that in 1960. The car was a custom show car from 1956 to 1960, and Dick and Jim both built it, and you put it in the car shows, and it was a beautiful, beautiful car. And so Dick had done most of that. But anyway, when the car had finally come to the point to be retired, Dick is the one that cut out the wheel wells, cut out the firewall, was going to put a laminated wood firewall in, a custom firewall. You have to remember, when you go to a custom car show, you get points for all the things that you change. The more things you change, the more points you get. So Dick took it completely apart, cut it all off. The whole front third of the body had been cut out. All this was gone. And so in order to make it back to the Jewel, I had to put it all back in there. I'm in the process right now of rebuilding the fenders. If any of you out there have a 52 Chevy I can use for parts, I'd like to have it. But I'm going to concentrate on getting the front end done now. I'm still looking for pieces for the back end to repair the back end. A lot of these pieces you can't buy new. Some of them you can, some of them you can't. And so my plan is to get this front end completed, that I can take it to the sandblaster, get the body completed, take the sandblaster, bring it back. And I plan on having this car completely in primer, ready to paint by the end of March. And that might be an overachieving goal, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to get her done. And so I'm very glad that my good friend Mike Piros is doing this today to keep track. This car has an incredible history. It's got an incredible background. We do have a lot of the information on it, a lot of the intellectual information on it of the car shows and the magazines. The car was featured in many magazines over time. From 1956 to 1960, this was a very wild custom car. By today's standards, pretty mild, pretty milk toast, I guess you could say. But back then, it was a killer car, and I'm going to put it back to that. And you know, I was good friends with Jim. I was better friends with Dick. Dick and I did a lot of projects together. But when the car ended up in my front yard one day, they said they were going to cut the front end off and hang it on the wall. I about had a heart attack and contacted Jim, and thanks to the good blessings of Jim and some other fellas, Mike and Chris Schmidt, they managed to work a deal where I could buy the car and then rebuild it. And I promised Jim that's exactly what would happen, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Now, one thing about the car was the car had been built from 1956. Jim wrecked it in the meantime, and that's when they started to rebuild the front end. So the car went through a series of changes, but for many years, 2 or 3 years, it was basically stock firewall, stock frame, 6-cylinder motor, 6-cylinder, 3-speed transmission. It was basically stock that was heavily customized. And then in the latter part of 1957, 58 is when they started the big changes with the dual quad front end and the tube grill, the beautiful work done on the back end, the Art Deco work that was done on the back end of the car. But in the meantime, Dick, after 1960, Dick had rebuilt the car, bought it from Jim, had rebuilt the car, and had been driving it for several years, doing little changes here and there, and then decided that he was going to make a full-blown show car out of it. So Dick, in his wisdom, and I talk to Dick every day since I started working on it, and I say, Dick, why did you do this to me? All this entire part of the cowl, the firewall, clear back into the floor had been cut out. And then braces had been put in there, and they were going to put in a wood firewall, a laminated wood firewall, as a custom feature. Of course, obviously they weren't going to drive it again, but it was going to be a full-blown custom car. But when they did that, they cut off the body mounts, went clear black in the body. So I had to put all that back in to get the structure of the car back and to get a starting point to bolt the front fenders and everything back together. So I had a donor car that Mike came up with, Mike Frios came up with for me. And I cut this old firewall, the whole front of this body out in one piece and slid it all back in and welded it all back in. And I know you're going to think this is funny, but it took me 9 hours of old school gas welding, which people just don't do that anymore. But I had to because it's impossible to weld this rusty metal with a wire feed. And I was welding a lot of old metal back together. And it's good, the welding's good. But it took me 9 hours of gas welding, 97 pieces of coat hangers, and 2 hours of wire feed to get this back in. As you can see, we filled it here, filled it over there. And what we're going to do, as Jim's request, because I did talk to Jim before he passed, what he wanted with the car, and he said, I want you to build it the way I wanted to get it done. I never did get it done the way I wanted to get it done, build it that way. So we're going to mold this in nice and smooth and put polished aluminum here and paint this center section and finish this out as a nice, smooth, custom firewall. That's the first thing we're going to do that Jim wanted. And then the second thing, of course, is we're going to change the color. It was Tahitian orange because nobody had candy apple back then. Nobody knew how to paint it. Candy apple finally came from California in the late 60s, but nobody knew how to paint it. So Jim always wanted a candy apple paint job and never got it. So I'm going to paint it candy apple red with the Tahitian gold on the side. Was that Tahitian? That was Persian gold on the side. And so we're going to put that all back. So it's going to look almost like the way Jim wanted it, only it's going to be his dream car that he always wanted. And so you can see, as we go inside, you can see the amount of work that I had to do to get this car back, just so I could get started working on it. This normally in a car is all here, so you don't have to do all this work to start doing the body work. So I had to put all this back just so I could get started on it. What we're looking at now is the inside of the car, because we want to show you the amount of work that had to be done just to bring the car back to original so we could start working on it. But you can look right here and you can see this old school gas welding, because this metal is really rusty and a wire feed welder will not weld it, so we had to use gas. And I'm not done, by the way. I'm still working out getting all these little holes and stuff finished up, but I got about 99% of it done. But the good thing about doing it the way I did it is you can see right over there where all these body lines all matched up. That was important, so that when we put this all together and bolted the front fenders on, it was all going to line up straight and the hood would fit. Because if you didn't get that right, you might get it on, the hood might be sticking 3 inches off the front of the car. So it was very important that we got this all put back in the way it needed to be. Clear over to these body mount fender holes, bolt holes over here, all that had to be put back in. And the wonderful thing about this car when I saw it, that I was so excited about being given a chance to buy it, is it's almost 95% rust free. You can see some small spots that I have repaired over there by the seat mount and over here, and I've still got some to do underneath, but this car was 95% rust free. That saved me a lot of time. This was the worst part, so I've got that behind me, so it's a matter of now just getting this body straightened up, get it sandblasted, and start fixing the dents and turning this baby into a prime car ready for paint. Now what we're going to do here now is I'm going to show you what we're going to do with these fenders. You can see These fenders have been extremely cut out radically. Dick was going to put GTO flares over these fenders, which probably was that big ticket back in 1965 or 62 or something. Boy, I'll tell you what, it really made a mess out of them. So what I'm doing is of course they don't make these new, so what I've done is I've taken some pieces out of some old fenders and I'm going to weld these in here just like this. And I'll get that all sheet metaled up and we'll get that screwed together and we'll get that welded and get that ground off. And these are going to be really easy to do, just a lot of work. So that's going to solve that problem. And this piece and the back fenders are the worst part of the whole car. This is the part that's going to be the most work to fix. The rest of this is just a matter of a little bit of Bondo and a little bit of fiberglass, and we'll straighten this out just like new. What few dents there are, the hood's real good, the doors have some dents, but there's no reason that we can't get the bodywork done on this car within at least a week once I get it all welded up. I wish I had the opportunity to show you what we faced when we got the car, but Dick was a fantastic craftsman. I just can't expound on that enough. But he had cut the front of the old hood off across here and welded this one great big long piece right across here. He was going to make a semi-pancake hood sort of across the front of this, just simply for car show purposes, not really meant anything. And I wanted to put it back to the way it was when Jim had it as the Jewel. So I had to cut all that out of there, grind all that weld down, and then I used the donor hood off the 49 Chevy to put it back in here and make sure that I had all my lines lined up. And so it took me about a half a day to get this done. I mean, there was a lot of welding done inside of here, and to get this back where it fit, we've got it done now. But that was the sort of thing we faced when we started working on this car, is to get it back to the point where we could start doing what we needed to do. And so that was just part of it. We're going to talk just a minute about the rear end of this car, which has had a tremendous amount of work done to it, because all this from one side clear over here is all custom made. The original car, the fenders just came back to kind of a little round spot and had a little tail light back here, and that was it. And this piece was flat, perfectly flat. So Dick is the one that did this, molded this in, welded this all up. This is all lead. There is no Bondo back here. And look at the workmanship in this car. Look at this. Look at this right here. That's lead. Amazing, after 40 years of time frame, that this has been sitting outside, that this has still managed to be in the conditions it's in. And I'm going to put all this back. This is just so awesome. And what I plan on doing is I'm going to run a regular stock taillight here that I'm going to find one that'll fit right in. And then I'm going to put red plexiglass over this whole works. And then I'm just going to mount just lights behind it for tail lights. So the whole thing will light up as a tail light, which is what Dick had done once I get this all put back together. Jim Nugel just loved this. He just loved this scoop. And it was the big thing back then, was to put a scoop in the back of your car over the rear window. This is a custom-made scoop that's deteriorated a little bit. And I'm not sure, I think Mike said these came off of a Buick or something like that. Is that right, Mike? Buick?
Yes.
And so this, again, is all handmade up here. But you notice there's no lead clear out into this roof, because this had to be heated and welded in here, and then this lead put in here to get this all straightened out, which none of this is warped. That talks about the craftsmanship of Dick that built this car, and a couple other guys, to build this scoop, heat this up, go out in the middle of this great big roof, and nothing's warped. It's just as straight as can be. So I'm really looking forward to getting this dressed up, get this cleaned up, get this put back to the way Jim loved it. This is Bill Napoli speaking to you once again about the Jewel as we wrap up this segment of the restoration process. We're talking to you from the inner sanctum. Like I said, this is a real private area, so we're not going to be allowing any people to come in and visit. But you will see it when it's finished, and then you will see it on the YouTube. And we're going to do 2 or 3 of these as we go through the process. When I get it into primer, get it ready for paint. When we get the new motor in it, as we start to reassemble it, we'll be doing videos on all those till we get to the finished process. It's probably going to take another Depending on how my workload goes this summer, it might take another 7 or 8 months. So this is on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel, and then you'll get notified when the next installment of this rebuild process moves along. And I hope you will watch it, because this is a tremendous piece of history for western South Dakota, for the Rapid City area. This is one of the last custom cars that was built in Rapid City in the 60s. The rest of them are all gone. This is the only one that's left, and we are going to preserve it and preserve the history of it, and we want you to follow along behind us.